put yourself under pressure. Huh? You could have a new book every year. Look at you.
That's exactly what I plan to do. I think it's a wonderful project to have on the side the whole time.
Well, it's always good to see you, John, and I'm very pleased that you've put out a new book. It's called MAGNETiiZE. Stop the chase, understand the change, take control of your future. I actually saw you not so long ago at an event we both did together.
Yes.
And you were talking about how the world is changing.
Yes.
How business is changing.
Yes.
And I always think that it's got to be exciting for you because no 2 days are the same.
Yeah.
There's new information coming out all the time.
Right.
You have to incorporate new technology, new ideas, new developments in almost every
Field.
Speech that you give, every presentation that you deliver. So you must be working on this thing 24/7.
It's my highest excitement to be curating the information. You know, when I relax at home, what I'm doing is watching these sort of things. You know, so for me,
so what are you most excited about? And we were talking about smart homes earlier this morning.
Yes.
We were talking about how you can turn on your kettle from your phone while you're in your car 10 minutes from home and it'll be boiling by the time you get there.
Yes.
You can switch off your electric blanket after half an hour just by programming it into some device.
Yes.
You'll be able to have lights that come on as you move through the house in different rooms and switch off behind you as you stop using that room. I mean, that kind of thing to me, it sounds almost like sci-fi, but there are people already living like that in this country.
Yes, absolutely they are.
Are you living like that? What kind of a life do you have?
Well, I don't think it's as high-tech as that specifically. I think there's different parts of touch points in my life that are high-tech. That sort of stuff doesn't really excite me too much. What excites me most is biotech, is biology, our ability to start playing God, actually. For us to get a longer life, a healthier life, a cyborg life, eyes that can see better, ears that can hear better. In fact, even become taller if you want to be in the future. So that, for me, is really the most exciting part. I think tech on its own is evolving at a massive pace, and the touch points and the ramifications we don't even understand totally yet. Yeah. The examples that you've chosen now are just fun ones.
But it came up in discussion earlier this morning, but I'm also interested in this biotech stuff because clearly this is going to mean better, healthier lives for many people all over the world. What we often get into the mistaken bad place of doing is that we very often fall into the trap of thinking that the world is getting worse.
It's definitely not.
That it's harder to be alive, that it's more dangerous, that people talk about crime and war and Trump and all of this stuff, and they think the world is worse than it's ever been, which is absolutely statistically not true.
Absolutely correct. I think it's the focus point that we have and the sensationalism that we see from all the news channels that keep people trapped.
Why do we love bad news? I mean, this is something I wish I could figure out and I wish could be explained to me in simple terms.
Well, our brains are not here to give us pleasure. They're here to give us survival.
Aha. So explain that to me.
So our brains are wired. Well, our brain is wired to survive. So we're in survival mode. So we look for many different aspects of our reality to look at how do we survive through it. We have to choose to be happy. That's not the immediate reaction our brain gives us. Our immediate reaction is to keep us safe.
I'm very interested. Here's a story that I saw just the other day. Over 50% of Americans find themselves among the top 10% of income earners for at least 1 year during their lives. Over 11% of Americans will be among the top 1% for at least 1 year. The rate of turnover in these groups is extremely high. And then I read something about India, because people always look at America and they go, oh, but that's easy because they're in the developed world. But India, listen to this, about 44 Indians come out of extreme poverty every minute.
Wow.
One of the fastest rates of poverty reduction in the world.
The world, yes.
As a result, India has finally shared the dubious distinction of being home to the largest number of poor people in the world. Isn't that interesting? Amazing.
I mean, the power of technology in business, pulling people out of poverty. I mean, if you think about humankind pre-1800s, we were all living on below $1 a day, the equivalent, you know.
And we knew so little, right?
Yes.
We knew in our entire lifetimes what would fit on the front page of a newspaper.
Absolutely,
today.
Our exposure was so very low.
So tell me some other things about why it's good to be alive right now, because I think people need to hear this stuff so that they can stop being miserable. We tend to focus on all the bad stuff, as you say, because we've got these survival inclinations in our brain.
Yeah.
But tell us about why things are good.
Well, I think if I just break down the pillars of what holds up capitalism, and the three pillars that hold up capitalism are communication, transportation, and energy. You need energy to create something, transportation to transport it, and communication to tell people about it. These three pillars are going to be free over the next 10 years. And so the pillars that have held up capitalism as we understand them are imploding. And we're starting to move to this place called the zero marginal cost society, where things will start costing us almost nothing. And if you think this is far-fetched, already today, the one that we feel the most is communication. WhatsApp is for free, emails are for free, and I mean relatively free, obviously.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very, very low cost.
Oh, it's very low cost. I mean, WhatsApp and I was looking at the stat yesterday, WhatsApp and Skype together have disrupted the telecom sector by $386 billion. I was at a Vodacom conference a couple months ago. I was emceeing and speaking.
Damn, one day you'll be able to tell people there was a company called Vodacom once.
Well, they're going to have to change. Well, no, they have to just change what they're doing. I mean, if they're smart about it.
Yeah.
And they were complaining of the fact that what WhatsApp has done to their business, and in fact, every executive there was using WhatsApp as well. I mean, that in itself, the irony of it. But I think what's going to happen next is energy. Energy will start moving towards becoming decentralized and almost free for us to start utilizing. And then the next will be transportation over the next 10 years. And the trajectory is showing this very clearly, the world we're moving into. So I think it's really about people choosing.
But hang on.
Yes.
Before you move on to people choosing anything.
Yes.
This is about abundance. This is about the fact that we don't have to be limited by resource scarcity anymore.
Yes. Yes.
People who... There are very few people in the world at the moment who are in situations of dire poverty or starvation. That was not the case 10, 20 years ago.
Yes.
There are many people in the world who are, under imminent threat of death, but it's far, far smaller a number than have ever been.
Child mortality has dropped. I mean, there's so many of these. Education has increased.
In Africa, we have some of the fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa, except us, obviously, because we've been run really badly by piss poor government.
We're coming right.
Yes. But in sub-Saharan Africa, we have the fastest growth rates of some of the fastest growth rates in the world in terms of economic growth.
Yes.
More people are coming out of poverty, as indexed by that India number I gave you just a moment ago. Income has grown by 183%
right
in the world.
Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah, there are more millionaires, more billionaires.
Correct.
I mean, we're on our way to the first trillionaire.
It seems that, and a lot of people still see the cake as only being so big.
Yes.
But the real key to emancipating yourself from the idea of being limited is that the cake can be as big as you want it to be.
Well, this is what I was going to say just before you started. The choice. I call it the incredible privilege of choice. You choose what you want to focus on. You choose whether you want to see the world in this abundant space or a place of scarcity. And the truth is that people have been making money when times were bad and when times are good. And some people can never make money, whether times are good or bad.
That's right.
And so that's a place of choice, and so sort of people don't want to take the responsibility for taking on their own shit in order to sort themselves out, to become powerful humans.
They externalize everything. They make it's someone else's fault. It's the system. It's this. It's that. It's never them.
Well, of course it's never them, because, I mean, as a white male today, everything's stacked up against you. And you can hear these white males moaning until the cows come home. And then you can get some black people that complain about this, that, and that. Then you get women complaining about this, and that. And then you get... I mean, it's just constant. I mean, so everybody can choose what they want to focus on.
Nobody cares about what you're complaining about.
Nobody.
No.
Unless you're also wanting to complain about the same thing, then you can have a pity party together.
All right, but let's just talk about some of these because you started with biotech, so I want to go down that route.
Right.
Because for us, the hardest thing, we talk about abundance, the hardest thing to create more of is time.
Yes.
Because that, people have always said, is a finite resource. You've only got X number of years on the earth, but that's also changing. And,
yes.
And soon we will be living much, much longer.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing this thing with Sanlam at the moment where saying that the first 200-year-old has already been born.
Yes.
And that the first person to live to 200 is already among us.
Yes.
Who knows that might not, in the next 10 years, get to 400.
Exactly. I was just going to say, it's more exponential than that, I think.
Because Moore's Law says that we're developing...
Well, Moore's Law is now, they reckon Moore's Law is even now being outgrown.
Oh, really?
Yes. No, they're
Outpaced?
outpaced. Yeah. They say Moore's law has been outpaced right now because with the
Let's
advent
just
of
explain Moore's law is where your ability to do something or for something to happen doubles every year.
so every 12 to 18 months, technology doubles and halves in price.
Right.
That's what Moore's law has been doing since
And now
the beginning of
we're
whenever.
outperforming that?
Yeah, we are outperforming that in certain technological spaces. Solar being one of them. The advent of solar becoming cheaper is outperforming Moore's law, as well as the sort of advent of DNA and quantum computing is about to start coming online, and that is billions of times faster than our fastest computer in the world right now, which is called Summit, which does 200 quadrillion movements a second, or calculations a second. This quantum computing is going to be a billion times faster than that specifically. So Moore's law is about to get trashed.
That's amazing. And these developments and this research that will come with it and the ability to, as you say, in inverted commas, play God, will give us extra longevity, extra health, all kinds of other benefits.
Yes.
But let's go back to your original discussion around capitalism and transport, communication, and what was
Energy.
The other one? Energy.
Yes.
So you say these things are going to become
Free.
zero cost.
Yes.
What is the incentive then for people to be productive? I'm curious about, because there's a human psychology element here. You know, a lot of the conversations around where technology is going and what people are up to has to do with what our brains can actually get done. I mean, there's so much going on in the world right now. There's so much information being blasted at you that your primitive mammalian primate brain sometimes just doesn't know what to prioritize.
Yeah, well, that's why people are going towards voting for Trump and Brexit. They want simplicity again. They want clarity again. There's too much noise, too much confusion, and the reptilian brain is taking over and saying, well, separate. I need simplicity and I need clarity in my life.
That's an interesting take. So you almost think that that's a reaction to too much happening.
Too much happening, too fast. Let's go back to the old days. Let's go back to the simplicity of what it used to be.
What does that mean for business? Because there'll be a reaction similarly in business, won't there? If there's a reaction like this in politics, then how are people reacting business-wise? Because business has always been driven by, you have to have constant growth. You have to have productivity. You have to have services and products. You have to have people doing as much as possible. This industrial idea of manufacturing.
Well, I think that the message that I'm trying to get across to every audience that I speak to, anybody who reads my book, is that can we start using business for something else besides just profitability? Because if we are able to utilize the model of business for the empowerment of people around us, where we are not measuring success and profitability on a quarterly basis, but rather on a more long-term, as I call it, cathedral thinking process, what we do is we apply a mature consciousness towards business. And I think we're seeing that in many aspects.
But it blurs the lines.
Explain that.
Well, if a business becomes more than a business, if a business starts to empower people and that kind of thing, which of course all businesses do in some way, shape, or form. But once it starts to make that one of its priorities, and business has always been defined by the fact that it's a profit-seeking enterprise. Now you're saying it needs to do these things that are social, that are political, that are community-oriented or whatever they might be. It does change the nature of business. Isn't that something that starts to look a little bit different?
Absolutely it does.
To take on traits and characteristics that aren't necessarily as easily defined as business.
Well, you see, Capitalism 101 was about this incredible need for profit now at all expense. And that's why the environment has been ruined. That's why so many people are depressed and on drugs because of this constant pressure for more. I think.
But capitalism has been the greatest tool for emancipation of people in human history.
But I think it's reaching its sell-by date, because how much further, how much more can we be acting like teenage boys trying to have this constant need for more? I think there was a great line that Peter Diamandis said. He said, we should all be striving to be the new type of billionaire. And the new type of billionaire is somebody who impacts 1 billion people's lives positively.
Yeah.
And so,
but the best way to do that is to either sell people something they want, which is the whole purpose of producing a product.
Yes.
Or deliver a service that people need.
Yes.
Or be able to give people employment.
Yes, but with...
Isn't that the greatest thing you can do for someone? Walking around kissing babies is politicians' job.
No, but hang on a second. What I'm saying is the way you make the product can be a very different way you go about doing that, so that you understand that you don't have to squeeze the supplier for every last cent, so you can come up with a product that's as cheap as possible in order to be able to get that consumer to buy from you. Rather, go through a process of conscious capitalism where you have a fair deal with the supplier that sustains the supplier over a long period of time, a consumer that understands this trust and is happy to pay a bit more because they understand where it's coming from, and the business is making a fair profit over a longer period of time.
Yeah, but at some point you have to acknowledge human selfishness in all of this.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the raising of consciousness.
Okay, but this is then you're talking a little bit utopian here.
Well, not utopian, because what you are starting to see...
The supplier's going to... the supplier's going to try to gouge out as much as he can from the manufacturer.
Right.
Manufacturer is going to try to gouge out as much as he can from the consumer. And the consumer doesn't want to pay more than he absolutely has to.
Well, I disagree, because it depends what sort of consumer you're speaking to. There's certain consumers that are driven by price and other consumers that are driven by the purpose behind the product that they're buying. So you most probably won't buy from a brand that has been seen as not following a ethical process of doing business. Whereas before in the 80s...
I bought from arms dealers before. What are you talking about?
I'm talking even down to having Adidas being seen to use child labor. This was many years ago.
I know, who else is going to get their little hands into those,
yeah, exactly.
Do me a favor.
Well, the whole point of my book is that the way it's being done doesn't necessarily mean it's the way we need to do it moving forward. And I'm trying to get people to understand that there's a different way to go about making profit over a longer term process.
I like the sound of this conscious capitalism. I just don't know that it takes into consideration the realities of human psychology.
Well,
and of course human psychology is changing.
Evolving,
of
yes.
course, and we're becoming a little bit more connected to each other, and
yes.
we're becoming a bit more dependent on each
yes.
other in a positive way.
Yes.
And that will change things, but it does sometimes require the passage of a lot of time, because we do have default settings of tribalism, of
yes.
selfishness,
yes.
of racism, of sexism, of ethnocentricity and
yes.
that kind of thing,
yeah.
which are still very real things.
Yes.
And they're not, by no means are they anything like the kind of level or scale of those things that we've experienced in the past.
Right.
But we still have remnants of them,
yes.
particularly in parts of the world where maybe things aren't going as fast as in others.
Yes. Well, listen, I'm talking about the bleeding, cutting edge of what society should be moving towards. Everything that you've said now, I absolutely agree with, but it's not my focus point.
And don't
my
get
focus
me wrong,
point
I'm
is
not trying to hold you back.
No, I understand.
All the crap at the back of the
but I like the way you always do this whenever you interview anybody, is that you want to give both perspectives. And I don't disagree with what you're saying. What I'm saying is, why can't we try something new? And I think it's based on my own conscious development, and my own way of understanding that there's a different way to go about doing things rather than being in this constant chase. And this world is stuck in something I call the horny teenage boy syndrome, where we're constantly racing towards a ending that nobody even knows, to the ending of a coffin. And what you've done is amassed lots of money and have created a partnership and a law firm, and you've got a big fat Mercedes-Benz, and well done, and now you're dead. Because one last thing is that society's created this idea that accomplishment equals purpose, and it doesn't. Just because you've been accomplished, and you know what, well done that you've been accomplished. You studied, you worked hard, you went through the process, but you didn't reach your purpose, dude. And that's a sad thing, and I think society needs to be redesigned to prioritize purpose over accomplishment.
Do you think that that's possible?
Absolutely, it's possible.
Have you seen it in practical terms occur?
I see it's people around me that are changing because of their priorities changing, and just myself being driven by money and the need for more in my 20s, and now in my 40s to be driven by purpose.
Yeah, by the way, I'd advise anybody who wants to know John's story, because we spoke about it at length in the last interview that we had. Yeah. And it's a fascinating story of real, triumph and then disaster, and the way that you've configured the world around you since then. And I do believe that you mean what you say, and this book is tremendous, because you also are asking questions that I think a lot of us ask about what's the point?
Yeah. When did the race start? Why are you always in a hurry? Where are you in a hurry towards? When do you finish this race and when do you win it,
What do you consider to be the major accomplishments of people who you look up to? And what makes them worth looking up to?
It's changed. You know, in my 20s, it was the power and the money and the sexy cars and the clothes. Today, it's about the ability to be high value as a human being. And the sort of high value human being idea is that every human being requires attention, acceptance, and approval. Low value human beings beg for attention, acceptance, and approval. Low value human beings become aggressive to gain attention, acceptance, and approval, or compete to get attention, acceptance, and approval. A high value human being gives attention, acceptance, and approval. And for me, that's by far the most impressive thing to do.
I love that. That's a very, very nice definition.
Yeah. And for me, when I see somebody do that, when somebody can listen and not necessarily agree, but debate calmly and ask serious questions without being facetious, without having backhanded, manipulative sort of...
constantly trying to assert themselves in the hierarchy.
Exactly. And when I see that, I have got the deepest respect. And that is my aim in life, is to try and speak to somebody that I don't agree with and listen to them rather than shut off.
Do you think that it is possible for a country like South Africa to catch up quickly enough? Because we are behind the curve at the moment.
Yes.
To catch up quickly enough. And you know, all of this stuff that you and I get excited about, that
Yes.
we've spoken about ad infinitum,
Yes.
you know, the technological revolution that's taking place before our eyes, the opportunity most people have, the empowerment that mobile devices and things have brought to people. Do you think that that is enough to get us back on track? Because we have had a setback or two in the last 10 years in South Africa, to the point where a lot of people have given up on the system and have started to think that maybe throwing out the baby with the bathwater is a good idea. I mean, all these reasons that humanity seems to be moving forward don't really matter to someone who's in survival mode.
Yeah, well, you see, I think the thing is that South Africans suffer from South Africanism.
What's that?
Well, you know, I'll give myself as an example. I was booked 5 years ago for my first international talk.
Right.
And I spent 30 seconds celebrating and 6 weeks absolutely petrified. I thought to myself, what will I, a little South African, tell anybody in Holland they don't know? I got there, I was one of the best speakers at the conference, and I realized that in my own psychology, I'd seen myself as a lower standard citizen. And so for me, I did a talk at a French tech conference, and I opened the conference, and my message was, we are not South African. We are not African. We are global citizens. And when you speak to people that are operating on a global level, they don't see themselves as regional people. They see themselves as global citizens. So I think as South Africans, the first thing we need to understand is it's not a South African issue. It's a psychological issue that we hold on to for some unknown reason. The Australia's perspective of us and the rest of the world's perspective of us that we are second standard, we have somehow bought into. We've bought into this idea. And the more I travel, the more I spend time overseas, I realize that other people don't have this. You know, it's like, sometimes women feel like they are second standard citizens in certain areas, and yes, they get treated like that, but Oprah never thought that. You know, she was way past that.
Yeah. The story of winners is that they don't conform to what people expect them to.
And I think South Africans, we mustn't conform to the message that's out there. So can we play catch up? Absolutely. Where does it start? In your internal dialogue of how you see yourself and how sort of impact that you can have with the rest of the world.
So this book, MAGNETiiZE, is this kind of a handbook to starting to make your decisions work for you? Is this a way to get yourself up to speed with how the world is changing around you and how you could position yourself to benefit from that?
I think the best way to describe it is this. I start one of the chapters with this line that says, are you running away from the darkness, or are you running towards the light? In other words, are you anxious or excited? From the outside, it looks exactly the same. Our actions are deliberate, we're focused, we're goal-driven, but one is running away from a dragon that's going to eat you, and the other one's building a castle in the sky. And for me, the book is, how do you go about changing your energetic focus points in order to build a life that you're not chasing, not fueled by anxiousness, rather that you're building and fueled by excitement. So I go through the human psychological shadows and how they drive behaviors that are not always our behaviors. They are this pain body behavior or the shadow behavior that we haven't healed.
A lot of this is psychological. What is
Yes.
this shadow behavior?
Jung,
give me
the Jung
exam-
principle.
Right, give me some examples of what people do because they're trapped.
Yes, so just quickly, the shadow is certain aspects of your personality that society and religion have told you you're not allowed to show in the world. Being horny. Not allowed to do that in religion.
No.
Not allowed to touch anybody. And so what happens is that you have priests that are playing with little boys. And that's it's not a religious situation, it's a psychological situation. Because the priests were told you're not allowed to do this. And so what it does, it festers in the shadows.
And
it becomes a disgusting aspect.
Yeah.
And so the Bible Belt in America is also the porn belt in America.
Of course, yeah.
Because that's in the
Always
shadow.
right. Wherever you find people who are moralizing
Exactly.
about what other people should be doing, they're doing something.
They're doing it themselves. How many politicians are anti-gay and then they're gay?
Exactly. You always find that
Exactly.
where the most resistance is.
So the world is built on a set of dysfunctional psychological humans dealing or not dealing with their shadows. When you unearth these shadows, your motivating factors change. What you're trying to create changes. You're not hiding things all the time.
Yeah.
And so it always starts
People
with...
can focus their energy on the stuff that really matters.
Exactly. We're not caught up in reaction. We then become proactive rather than reactive. And then, when I first started doing what I'm doing, I used to spend 90% of my books, keynotes, vlogs, and blogs on the future and 10% on psychology. As I've evolved, I've realized it's 90% psychology and 10% the future. Because when you get your psychology right, the future's obvious. It's obvious what you should be doing. When you don't have your psychology right, then you need tools and rules and strategies and purpose and whys and sort your own shit out. Everything else makes absolute sense.
There's a very strong vein of personal responsibility going on here.
Absolutely.
Very strong vein of this. Why do you think so many people are uncomfortable or unable to confront their own role in success or failure? Like, a lot of people just are not good at coping with the fact that they are where they are because they've made bad decisions.
Learned behavior. They've watched their parents and society do it. And so it's really about reaching a very, very painful situation in your life, and hopefully that becomes the catalyst for you to ask new questions about yourself and about how you fit in. And if I just watch my parents and I watch a society around me, victim mindset and those discussions were natural. They were just what everybody did. There was no other way to go about doing this.
And I do think we in South Africa have a large propensity to complain
Yes.
and to moan about things.
Yes.
We love to moan. It almost gives us a sense of purpose and meaning.
Yes. Well, it gives us
Dangerous.
acceptance, attention, and approval. We complain and moan so we can be accepted and get attention from people around us.
That's that low-value human being.
Low-value human being, no responsibility. But then Mid-America is the same. The Midlands in England are the same. Every country has a set of these people. I think South Africa, we are growing out of it, and we're still a young society. We need to mature ourselves out of it, and competing against the countries in the world that have been mature for hundreds of years is an unfair sort of a comparison. And I think we're getting there. And I think it's important for me to be talking about these things on a constant level, because organizations ask me to come and speak about the future and profitability. And I think those are really important. But really what I swing about in the keynote, and you have been at one of my keynotes, I end off with, be a high-value human being, take responsibility and make things happen. Profitability will follow. So I think it's important for as many of us to be sort of planting these seeds as possible.
I mean, there's so many people who also will, they haven't got themselves right.
Yes.
And instead of getting themselves right and then spreading good
Yes.
and helping someone else, or getting a partner and being able to raise a family and raising those kids with intent and making it positive and purposeful.
Yes.
A lot of people are so broken that they think that just by adding bits and pieces of other people, they'll somehow make themselves right.
Also stuff.
More
More
buying
stuff.
things, right?
Buy things.
Conspicuous consumption.
Conspicuous consumption, the underpinning mega trend that drives the emerging markets around the world. The Beijings, the Dubais, the Johannesburgs of the world are young societies, and this is where you go for shopping and restaurants and expensive products and expensive goods. You go to the mature parts of the world, the mature awareness parts of the world, the people that have money for a long time, the Amsterdams, the Berlins, the pockets of Cape Town, the pockets of Sydney. These people have got money, but they ride bicycles and they grow their own vegetables and they wear normcore fashion. They've evolved past the need for recognition. And so it's this that I'm trying to get people to understand, is that this chase that you are on it's a never-ending chase. I was on it myself because when I was
there's no amount of shopping bags you can fill to make your soul feel
when I was 26, 27, I've never made more money in my life, and all I wanted was a little bit more. So it was just constant more. I had a beautiful home in Bryanston, and then I was like, Sandhurst. It's like, dude, calm down. And it's this constant chase that we need to get off the sort of treadmill.
So what about those people who really do break through the stratosphere and start making huge amounts of money and changing the world in very tangible ways? I mean, we talk about, people like Gates and people like Musk and people like Branson and these kinds of guys. Do you think that they are just greedy capitalists who haven't stopped wanting more, or do you think that they're people who are consciously making a contribution to the world and they're being rewarded for that?
I don't think you have to be a good person to make a lot of money. So let's just make that clear.
Yeah.
I think you can be a dog and make a lot of money. Sure. And I don't think money is about consciousness. I think
it's also not about how clever you are.
No,
there are a lot of
you can be the right place at the right time. Yeah.
Very poor and very stupid people who are very rich.
Well, I think it's your relationship with money that really determines whether you can hold and have the capacity to hold that much money and think that you deserve that much money, whether through your arrogance or through your confidence. That's up to you. But I think what's happening is we're starting to see these leaders around the world with so much money. I mean, look at what Buffett did. Gave all his money away. And now Zuckerberg's moved into that space. So I think there's this move towards this idea that it's not really that classy to hold on to that amount of wealth. And so that's the trend. I mean, if you think back to the 80s, it was all about the Wall Street guy, the Lamborghini and the loud music. And it's evolving. And we're already starting to see that. 1989 was a huge year for humanity. I don't know if you know what the 5 things that happened in 1989. I call them the seeds of consciousness.
I saw that in your book. You spoke about 89 as being a really important time.
Yes.
Why? What happened?
5 things happened in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell, which meant that capitalism or freedom beat communism.
Right.
Tiananmen Square happened, which meant that people were starting to go up against communism. Right. The Exxon Valdez happened, which means we started asking questions about the environment. The World Wide Web was invented, which meant that we were starting to now have access to more information than ever before. And the most important one, for the first time ever in 1989, the Western world's median age topped 40. In other words, that people in Europe and America and Japan topped 40 for the first time. And we all know, as human beings, hopefully, if you take on the need or the call to move into your more mature self, rather than going into crisis, choosing the passage towards your most real self, you change from me to we. You change from competition to collaboration. And so humanity started to do that shift. And if you look from 1989 onwards, look at the amount of powerful women that started to move into power. And I use a slide that shows the most influential people we have on earth today. Beyonce, Oprah, and Merkel. I mean, these people, this was never the case. Think back in the 80s and 90s, there was nobody like her. Thatcher was the only one, and she was more manly than most men were. And so...
in a good way. I mean,
but
as strong as an ox.
Oh, but proper, and she had to be, to play in a man's world.
No.
So I think it's really about the rise of the feminine consciousness that we're seeing around us, and it's not just in female embodiment, but within ourselves as masculine beings. How do we balance out our masculine and feminine?
Well, that's an interesting one. Like everybody's got a little bit of masculine and a little bit of feminine in them.
Yes.
And some people are obviously weighed more in one direction than the other, but you can draw power from both.
Well, I think you need to balance them in yourself. I think society has taught boys don't cry, girls sit with their legs closed, and there's all these rules that we've applied to ourselves from a very young age. And then what we do is we build up that one side of what we should be, and we don't have the balance of being able to be both nurturing and powerful. We think you have to be one or the other.
But isn't this also because humans try to... We create a type in our heads of what the perfect man or perfect woman is, and
that's also changed, Gareth.
Of course,
think back to the camel man,
and it should have.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because it was probably very unhealthy and very bad at one point and toxic.
Well, I mean, look at just Barack Obama. I mean, he's such a balanced human being. Yeah. He's got a very clear masculine and feminine within him. Look at his wife, a very clear masculine and feminine within him. And I think if you look at the most successful people out there, consciously, they've got a very balanced process, and I think that's what we need in society, is for ourselves to balance ourselves out and then be able to apply that more conscious, more mature way into the world.
I've got a question for you, because you've kind of walked this path in your own life. You've kind of had this
and still am.
This development that you're talking about over 25, 30 years in humanity
Yes.
has kind of happened to you as well in the
Yes.
micro sense.
Yes.
What would your 20-year-old, let's say 27-year-old, when you were really flying high, what would that 27-year-old John think of the John now?
Well, I wouldn't understand him. I would mock him. I wouldn't understand exactly what he, how does he even show his success if he rides his bicycle in Cape Town? Does he even have money? I mean, so the value systems, you know what? I don't even think I'd meet me because we would be in totally different places.
It'd be different worlds.
Oh, totally different worlds. And I think we create our pockets of reality, and we meet the people that are in line with our value systems, and we don't meet any other people.
And what do you think of that 27-year-old you now?
I would like to say you little dick, but I'm not, because I think most importantly I must have empathy towards him, because he didn't know better. And if I invalidate myself in the past, I invalidate my presence, and I can't do that. And I think that's with anybody in my past, is how do I go about seeing everybody in my past empathetically rather than being blaming? As Tony Robbins says, how do you move your memories from being unconscious to conscious? In other words, when your memories are unconscious, you're blaming your dad for being that way, or your mom for being that way, or your headmaster for being that way. When you move it to a conscious memory, you thank them for giving you the opportunity to step into that aspect of yourselves because of the pain that they caused you.
Yeah, again, you can't be a victim and have that mentality, because it's not gonna work. The two will annihilate each other.
Well, it's impossible to be in the same thought process.
So you have to step out of victimhood,
Yes,
in order to empower yourself.
You know, victimhood is such an intelligent ego construct. It's so deeply embedded in our perspective, we don't even know we're being victims.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that...
But some people thrive on it. They really do. You hear people with their sob stories,
Yeah.
and they live on that.
Yes.
That's their whole purpose. It's their
Yes.
meaning. It's their,
Yes.
their reason to get up in the morning is so
Yes.
that they can get attention,
Acceptance and approval.
affirmation
Yeah.
from people who they don't even know.
Based on
How sad their story
Yeah.
was. It
Yeah.
sounds like a horrible way to live, but some people seem to derive huge pleasure from it.
Well, I don't know if they're deriving huge pleasure. I don't think they know
Maybe-
there's
maybe
another
not.
way.
Yeah, maybe
I don't
not.
think there's I don't think
Maybe
they know.
significance.
Yes, significance. I think that's what they're deriving, or getting any sort of attention is giving them that. And I wish I could just shake some people and say, look, there's another way. It's much easier, much calmer, much more in the flow. It's much more fun. And, you can make, and I write it in my book as well, deciding to be purpose-led has been the most profitable decision I've ever made.
Have you had people come up to you after some of these talks and after they've read your book and everything and say, oh, well, I've now reevaluated everything and I'm on a different path, and thank you?
Yes.
That's incredible. That's a powerful thing, right?
It's the most powerful thing I think that any human being can do, is to help other people do better on their journey based on your own journey. And it's really important not to be preachy when you're doing it. And it's really, both my books and all my talks that I give are very much about my journey and what happened with me, indirectly telling the audience, look, this is really about you as well, but you can't be preachy up there. And I think the process of developing yourself is really important, but I think more important is to teach it. And I think when you're, like Mark Twain said it best, he said, the two most important days of your life are when you're born and when you find out why. And when you find out why, start telling people about that why so they can discover theirs. And so I think it's really important to be able to teach it. Yogi Bhajan has got a great saying. He says,
Yogi Vagina?
Yogi Vagina? Yogi Bhajan. Yogi Bhajan. That was close. He brought Kundalini yoga from...
I knew a few yogis, but I never met Yogi Vagina.
Well, you should go do some more tantra. You'll meet some of them. Yogi Bhajan brought Kundalini yoga from the east to the west. And he says this. He says, if you want to understand something, read it. If you want to... how does the saying go? Damn it. If you want to understand something, read it.
You're not allowed to get all your quotes right all the time. Yeah?
Okay, so the last thing he says is the best way to master something is to teach it. And that's the real thing here, is that I get better and better at my craft the more I write about it. I get better and better at my craft the more keynotes I deliver. So that it's just really my own gift to myself, but in indirectly we're helping other people see the light in some way.
And where do you draw that inspiration from? I mean, who are the people that you're listening to and learning from? You mentioned, this yogi, you mentioned Tony Robbins, you mentioned
Jordan Peterson.
Peter Diamandis,
Jordan Peterson.
I mean, he's interesting to me because when I interviewed him a while ago, it was just after he'd published his book, 12 Rules for Life, and he comes under quite a lot of fire from people, particularly in the left. And people say, well, it's all good and well for him to talk about personal responsibility, but he doesn't know what it's like to have blah, blah, blah happen.
Yeah, and I've seen those, yeah.
I mean, one of the things I really thought was very powerful about his point of view, and we'll talk about Tony Robbins in a moment as well, and I know less about some of the other people, is that you've got to start with yourself before you start to think about changing the world.
Yes.
A lot of people want to start with the world and work inward.
Yes.
But that's impossible.
Impossible.
You have to start with you and work outward.
Yes, I love Jordan Peterson for calling out the left's liberals. And I think that's the thing, is that the liberal people have now set up the tonality of what we allow to say and not say. And you always, it's like a Nazi party, but just on the left field. And for him, he's obviously coming under fire because he's calling them out. He's calling feminists.
Well, he's coming under fire, but he's having tremendous success.
Because he's telling people the truths that are not accepted in media and in public.
And I see lots of people who don't like him for various reasons, but he seems to be on a roll. This is a little-known academic. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have known who the hell Jordan Peterson was.
YouTube changed his life.
Yes. Yeah. And this is what technology can do for anyone with good ideas, right?
Yeah. Well, we are all now.
So, okay, Jordan Peterson.
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Who's that?
He's a scientist and a doctor he's written a book called Your Supernatural Self and the Placebo Effect. He fell off a bicycle about 10, 15 years ago and had his 6 vertebrae crushed at the back, his lower back, vertebra crushed in the back. He was in a wheelchair and the doctors asked him, he has to go for an operation. He refused. And he started to set up this mindset process of redesigning his health. And he's saying is this, he says, are you living a life that is based on a set of memories, or are you living a life that is based on the vision of the future? And what he describes is that we are playing repetition day in, day out, based on a set of memories that we've had. And what he says is that if we are not able to change our memories and release ourselves of the past, we can never start living visions of the future. And so if you think about it, is that if something happened to you 10, 15 years ago, and you still haven't forgiven that person, you are still very much part and parcel of that memory that's still holding you to your place. And so he's got a brilliant thing. He says every single human being is made up of a mind. This mind is made up of a personality. This personality is made up of temperates. These temperates are made up of behaviors. Behaviors are made up of moods. Moods are made up of habits, and habits are made up of rituals. So
wow.
If you were to break that down, he teaches you how to unpack them.
If you stop a bad ritual, you can start...
You stop everything.
You can go up the scale and eventually change the whole life.
From one small ritual.
So what happened to him in the wheelchair?
Well, he healed himself. No, he does
walks.
He does global talks now. He does talks all around the world. He writes books. He's a New York bestseller 3 times over.
It's not one of those bullshit stories where the priest in the church says to someone, "I'm going to heal you," and they fall down and they get up and they're cured.
Well, you see, he's brought science to it. So what he has, he has these people who come and do brain scans on the people that are going through his meditations and are going. So he's a doctor. He's a scientist that he's brought in the supernatural sort of angle to it. And that's what I love about him, is that he's not airy-fairy and he's not just religious. He's brought science and he's mixed it with a deep understanding of meditation and how the brain works. And so he's redesigning people's futures based on his methodology. So
I like the idea of breaking bad memories. I mean, I think that's
we don't even realize. He says, he's funny. He says, why are you in such a bad mood? He says, 8 years ago, somebody screwed me over in business and I still haven't gotten over it. So 8 years ago, and we don't realize we live lives based on a set of memories. And so he wants to redesign those.
Yeah, well, I mean, this goes back to the idea that you shouldn't be captive to other people's bad behavior years ago.
Yes.
You shouldn't force that to be your story.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
And that's a choice again, Gareth. I mean, I think if we had to sort of put a heading on this talk, it's like, take responsibility.
All right. Who else do you like listening to? Who else inspires you? You were going through some names.
I listen to Oprah.
Tell me why Oprah.
Yeah, so her podcasts. She has some fascinating people on her podcast. She had a guy I was listening to now, just actually sitting in the car on the way here, a priest for 44 years. And he says religion is the best thing and the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity. And the way he was going about describing, as a man of the cloth that has written 33 books about this process, how he was damning religion in a certain way, showing people up for having egos and then utilizing God as their way of making themselves feel more superior and safe in the process of salvation. And the way he was breaking that down, and only Oprah could have brought him on to give him this
She's
platform.
such a great interviewer.
Yo, she asked some incredible questions. But then again, you're our South African Oprah. You're just a little bit whiter and a little bit more male.
And much more poor.
Yeah, much more. But that's all of us, though. You're not alone.
Yeah, compared to Oprah, we're all miserable.
Yeah,
poor.
we're all miserable. Yeah.
I'm blown away by the amount of energy and enthusiasm you have for this work. What are the challenging parts of it? Like, what is the worst part of your day, and what do you not enjoy about being John? There's got to be some part of it that you think, this could be improved. Otherwise, you've got nothing else to work for.
So I think that my personality is built up in a way that I'm a perfectionist. And I drive myself crazy for making sure that every touch point of my brand and my work is constantly the best it possibly can be. And
it's kind of exhausting.
It's
right?
exhausting. It's exhausting. And I'm a super high achiever, and I'm constantly driving that. And I think the only thing that I can say that sometimes makes me upset is my immature impatience. Which is just my own self-driving sort of machine.
That's probably the only part of you that 27-year-old you would recognize.
Well, I think I'm much more calm than I'm that 27-year-old guy.
But you've still got that.
I still got that fire, I just want to get out there and...
Are you impossible in a relationship?
Yeah, I think so.
Are you?
Yeah, I've been married. I got divorced. I had another long-term relationship. I'm single now.
Oh.
I think I could be difficult, I think people are enthralled by this aspect of understanding my energy, my enthusiasm. Yeah. I think that can get a little bit tiring after a while. It tires me, let alone somebody in a relationship.
Sleep?
A lot.
How many hours do you
7.
get? Really?
Yeah, 7.
Good. Is that a discipline thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm at 9:30, 10, I'm in bed. I have a rule. Nothing good happens after 9:30, 10. You eat shit and watch shit. And you have sex with people you shouldn't be having sex with. So, I mean, that's if you're single. If you're married and you're not having sex with your spouse, then you're definitely having sex with the wrong people. But yeah, 9:30 in bed, 5:30 up, and into a ritual of training and just making sure that my gut health is right.
And you live in Cape Town now?
I live between Cape Town and New York.
Okay, and your gut health. Now,
gut health, yes.
Yeah, let's get to this, because this is something people they underestimate the value of this. I think this is hugely important. We're only beginning to understand it now.
Yes.
You are a large percentage of your DNA, they say close to 40 or 50% of what you are in terms of your actual code.
Yes.
Is contributed by bacteria and microbes that
yeah.
live inside you and lived inside your ancestors for thousands and perhaps even millions of years.
Yes.
You are part host to these things. They are chemically interacting with you all the time.
Yes. They're intelligent.
They inform your moods.
Yeah.
They inform your ability to think clearly.
Yeah.
They inform your ability to be fast or slow.
Yeah.
All of these things.
Yeah.
And we don't take much consideration of it. We take antibiotics, for example, kill off our gut bacteria
the devil,
because we're fighting a disease.
Yeah.
And then we end up killing off a little part of ourselves.
Absolutely. I think gut health is becoming more and more paramount to understanding not only our physical health, but our mental health as well.
So what are you doing? Eating handfuls of wheatgrass every day? What are you doing?
So I think that we should be doing 2 sets of anti-parasites a year so we can get rid of anything. I think we should be minimizing our intake of dairy and meat to a certain extent, because I think those carry a lot of high bad bacteria inside them.
Are you a vegan or vegetarian, or are you just...
I'm a vegan cross-vegetarian, so it just depends. When I'm traveling, it's very hard to be a vegan. When I'm at home, I'm a vegan. And I just think vegan's it's got such a connotation attached to it. I'd rather say plant-based. And I'm also not somebody that preaches it. The only thing I do preach is anti-animal cruelty. Right. And I think what's happened in the world around us, we have become used to the fact that factory farming is the norm.
And this is also a conscientiousness thing.
Exactly.
This
wake
is about
up.
being, aware of the suffering that you cause by doing bad things.
And it's almost like people say, well, animal cruelty, that's not really happening. And it's like almost like slavery really wasn't happening. And, it's just fine. And child labor really wasn't happening. So that's also okay. We can get our shoes made by kids. It's what's happening with animals. You've got a dog, and I know how much you share about it. And I had a dog who passed away 2 months ago, who was my son, really. And the level of intelligence they have is uncanny. Yeah. And so now you apply that to pigs, who are more intelligent than dogs, apparently. And now we are putting them in jails, torturing them in order to eat delicious bacon. Every time you have bacon, think about where it comes from. Look what's happened to that process. And if you shut yourself off...
I know I'm on the road to this eventually.
You have to be.
This is going to be a horrible thing to let go of, because I do genuinely, selfishly, stupidly, in a primitive sense, just enjoy bacon.
No, but hang on. Hang on.
Fuck.
So do I,
so
Gareth.
hard.
But so do I. And I still love steak. This idea of a fillet steak makes my mouth drool.
Oh my God.
But I would also love to have 3 slaves at my home, lock them up when they're finished working, and not pay them every month. That's also amazing. A butler, I could
nice.
then, I just have them all around. So it's not that. It's about, yes, of course you're going to miss those things.
You should be better.
But you should be better. And also, listen, what's happening around the world, we're starting to get substitutes. There's in the Impossible Burger, have you had it when you were in the States? So the Impossible Burger, which is now, they've raised, hundreds of millions now to improve their production facilities. You have an Impossible Burger, and it's made from plants 100%, and it bleeds because of beetroot. And it almost tastes too meaty for me. It's totally meat. You can't tell the difference. In fact, when we were in LA, we ordered it, and I was like, "Are you sure you gave me the right burger?" Because it was so meaty.
Was just like meat?
In fact, more meaty than meat, if that's even possible. So that's happening, and
I don't know whether I'm excited about this or put off.
Well, it's totally meat. It's plant based.
Yeah, I know, but it sounds, when you say it's too meaty, I'm like, oh, that's gross.
No, but I haven't eaten meat for years.
Okay.
You have.
All right.
So that's happening,
I'm with you.
and I suppose the thing with being plant based is about convenience. Our world is set up for chicken burgers and beef burgers as convenience factors. For you to become plant-based, it's just inconvenient.
Let's just talk about the environment for a minute, because I know that this is something that you're also quite conscious of, the human, the bad human effects of our activity on the planet.
Yes.
I mean, is this something that you're busy with, that you read a lot about? Is it something that some of these people who you're interested in following, that you pay attention to, that they're obsessed with too? Because a lot of people who have reached what I would say some kind of self-actualization seem to very quickly become activists in an environmental sense, because they realize the urgency of that problem.
Yes.
Are you one of those?
No. I do my own way of trying to wake people up. I think the environment specifically isn't my focus, no. But by giving people the tool sets to be able to wake up to the process, they can then choose what their focus points are. For me, it's the human psychology and responsibility. That in itself spills over to animal cruelty and the environment and all those other things.
Yeah, Ben, you said you've just started recycling. That's why I'm thinking about this.
You're cycling, yes.
The microphone. I can't hear you shout across the room. What's wrong with you? How long have you been in this business? So what do you have to? How many bins do you have? How does it work?
I now go to the point of 3 bins. So it's waste or compost, it's your general crap that you can't recycle, and then it's your big recycling section.
Mm-hmm.
So when you split it out like this, you start realizing what waste you're producing, the crap that you are throwing out there. And it comes back to what we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
Just become more conscious of what you do every single day. Because we all want things to change, and we're all so keen to call people dickheads and being lazy, but then what are we doing?
Yeah.
And it's that small little
That's
thing.
someone else's problem, right?
Because you always think like, well, no one else is doing this, so what's the point? But like, if you don't associate with everyone else, why are you acting like everyone else?
Yeah, it's a sort of mass bystander syndrome.
Yeah.
We're all waiting for somebody else to kick in with it, And it's that, again, not taking responsibility for it.
But what about people who are focused on leadership? I mean, this is something that James just touched on, and that I think you were heading towards in your last sentence. There are a lot of people who want someone else to take control for them. They're looking for a savior.
Yes.
They're looking for someone to do the heavy lifting, and then they'll come in and benefit from it afterwards.
Right.
And this is probably why we hero worship as primitive apes as well. We tend to think, if a certain human behaves a certain way, that they're better than us, and then we'll fall under their aegis and their protection, and everything will be better.
Yes.
And it tends to happen to people who I think maybe either had a very, very strong and forceful and not necessarily good relationship with their parents, or who didn't have any relationship with their parents.
Yeah. So you're looking for this constant father-mother figure.
Extreme, yeah.
And you're looking for constant acknowledgement.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I suffered from that, no father in my life, and being desperate for acknowledgement, and then following these sort of gang leaders. They might be even in corporates and wearing suits, but they're gangsters.
Still gangsters.
They're gangsters,
These
strong men of corporates.
Yeah.
And they bully you, and they do exactly what gangs do. They just have a 38-page contract in place made by a lawyer who's as much as a gangster as they are,
Yeah.
and play above board, but really they're not above board. But then again, you bring these people into your life when you haven't dealt with your shadows, you haven't dealt with your psychological issues, and then you're desperate for this need for acknowledgement, and then what you do is you get, with anything that's needing, when it's fueled by desperation, abuse is brought into it.
Right.
So you got to be not desperate, and I think that plays two ways. You were saying people are looking for leaders and looking for people to show the way. This has made my career very successful because when I get on stage, I know that psychology. People are wanting to have somebody tell them the way, give them answers, and
they don't want complicated answers.
No.
They don't want to deal with the psychology and having to come to terms with themselves and their own inefficiencies and their own inability to handle their trauma or their memories that they can't change or any of that stuff. Yeah. They want an easy answer. They want you to say, follow these 3 steps and you will be happy.
Well, I mean, I always say, the silver bullet is accretion. And accretion is a term from the solar system that is about space dust that's flying around the space. And after a few thousand years and a few million years, the space dust has collided with each other. And after 10 million, and it's become a planet or a star. Mm-hmm. It's these moment-by-moment decisions that you have the incredible privilege of choice to make. Do you want to be optimistic or pessimistic? Do you want to take responsibility or not? That's the answer. There is no other answer. And organizations will listen to my keynote and do a workshop and they'll say, John, what is the one thing we could do now? The one thing.
And they want the quick answer.
The one thing is that you must change your moment-by-moment decision-making process.
Wow.
That's as simple as that.
Well, what do you think of that, Sia?
Jeez. There's so many takeaways that I'm leaving with.
You're going to read the book.
This is awesome.
All right, if you haven't got the book, then go and get it. It's got a blinding gold cover. You can't miss it.
They say don't judge a book by its cover, but this
one you can.
Listen, it's a Ferrero Rocher of books. It's going to be delicious inside.
Why has MAGNETiiZE got 2 eyes?
Great, good question.
MAGNETiiZE.
You need to know the eye behind the eye in order to create a world that you need to stop chasing, or a life that you need to stop chasing. Oh. If you don't know the eye behind the eye, you will chase until you try and catch your tail, which you'll never do.
All right, and therefore it's also easier to look up on Amazon.
Yes, that too. I didn't want to go into that marketing ploy, but yes.
Sorry. Back to reality. MAGNETiiZE, and lots of compliments from people all over the world about this book. Stop the chase, understand the change, take control of your future. Johnson A. It's always nice to see you.
Thank you, Gareth.
Awesome. What a morning. Gee. Energized. I'm ready to go and see Barack Obama.
So